You know what? Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change your entire life. What I'm about to tell you happened just last month, and honestly, it's the kind of story that makes you believe in karma again. This young girl named Maya thought she was just going to a regular job interview. She had no idea that this one day would completely turn her world upside down. And the twist at the end? Nobody saw it coming. Not even me when I first heard this story. Let me paint you a picture. It's 7:30 in the morning in downtown Chicago. The streets are buzzing with people rushing to work, coffee cups in hand, everyone moving like they're part of some giant human machine. And right in the middle of all this chaos, there's Maya Rodriguez, 24 years old, fresh out of college, wearing her best outfit, which honestly wasn't much, but she made it work. Maya had been job hunting for 8 months. 8 long months of rejection emails, interviews that led nowhere, and her savings account getting smaller and smaller. Her rent was due in 3 days, and she had exactly $47 to her name. This interview at Sterling and Associates, one of the biggest consulting firms in the city. This was her last shot. Her absolute final chance to turn things around. She's walking down Michigan Avenue, checking her phone every 2 minutes to make sure she's not running late. The interview was at 9 a.m. sharp, and she knew this was it. Either she nailed this interview, or she'd have to move back to her hometown in Texas with her tail between her legs. Then she sees her, an elderly woman, probably in her 70s, struggling with 2 heavy grocery bags at the bus stop. The bags looked like they weighed more than the woman herself. She was tiny, maybe 5 feet tall, wearing a faded floral dress that had seen better days and shoes that were practically falling apart. Her gray hair was tied back in a simple bun, and she kept shifting the bags from one hand to the other, clearly in pain. Now here's the thing, and I want you to really think about this. Maya was already cutting it close on time. She had maybe 15 minutes to get to the building, go through security, find the right floor, and compose herself before the interview. Any normal person would have just walked by. I mean, let's be real, how many times do we see someone struggling and just keep walking? But Maya, she stopped. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, approaching the elderly woman with a warm smile. "Those bags look heavy. Can I help you with them?" The old woman looked up, and Maya noticed her eyes were this beautiful shade of blue, but they looked tired, really tired, like she'd been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders for years. "Oh, you don't need to trouble yourself, dear," the woman said in a soft voice with just a hint of an accent Maya couldn't place. "You look like you're heading somewhere important." "Nothing's more important than helping someone who needs it," Maya replied without hesitation. And guys, she meant it. This wasn't some calculated move or fake kindness. This was just Maya being Maya. She gently took the bags from the woman's hands, and wow, they were heavy. How was this tiny woman even carrying these? The bags were filled with groceries, basic stuff like bread, milk, canned soup, and some medication bottles. "Where are you headed?" Maya asked. "Just 2 blocks down, dear. But please, I don't want to make you late for wherever you're going." "Don't worry about it," Maya said, already walking in the direction the woman pointed. "I'm Maya, by the way." "I'm
Eleanor,"
the woman said after a small pause. "Eleanor Williams." As they walked, Eleanor told Maya about how she lived alone in a small apartment, how her arthritis made it hard to carry things, how she usually took the bus but it was running late today. Maya listened, really listened, asking questions and genuinely caring about this stranger's life. When they reached Eleanor's building, Maya helped her all the way to the 3rd floor. No elevator, just stairs. By the time they got to Eleanor's door, Maya was checking her phone anxiously. It was 8:47 a.m. She had 13 minutes to get to her interview. "Thank you so much, dear," Eleanor said, her eyes getting a little watery. "You have such a kind heart. That's rare these days." "Take care of yourself, Mrs. Williams," Maya said, already heading back down the stairs. "Maybe I'll see you around the neighborhood." Maya ran. I'm talking full sprint in business heels down Chicago streets. She burst into the Sterling and Associates building at 8:59 a.m., sweating, out of breath, but she made it. The receptionist, a stern-looking woman with perfectly styled hair, looked Maya up and down with obvious disapproval. Maya Rodriguez for the 9 a.m. interview, Maya gasped, still catching her breath. You're cutting it very close, the receptionist said coldly. Mr. Sterling doesn't appreciate tardiness. I understand. I'm sorry. I had to help someone and I don't need your life story. The receptionist cut her off. Take the elevator to the 14th floor. You'll be interviewed with the other candidates. Maya's heart sank. Group interview. Those were always brutal. When she got to the 14th floor, there were 5 other candidates waiting in a sleek conference room. Everyone looked polished, confident, and expensive. Their suits probably cost more than Maya's entire wardrobe. There was Brandon, this guy who kept name-dropping his MBA from Harvard and talking loudly about his internship at Goldman Sachs. There was Jessica, who spent the entire time fixing her makeup and talking about her father's connections in the industry. There was David, constantly checking his Rolex and making calls about his other job offers. And then there was Ashley, who seemed nice enough but kept nervous laughing at everything anyone said. Maya felt so out of place. These people belonged in this world of corporate success and designer everything. What was she even doing here? At exactly 9:15, a man in his 50s walked in. This was Mr. Richard Sterling, the managing partner. He looked like he'd stepped out of a business magazine, perfectly tailored suit, silver hair, the kind of commanding presence that made everyone sit up straighter. "Good morning," he said in a voice that could cut glass. "I'm going to be direct with you. We have one position available. One. And honestly, any of you could probably do the job from a technical standpoint. What I'm looking for is character." He began calling them one by one for individual interviews. Maya was last, which meant she had to sit there for over an hour, watching each candidate go in looking confident and come out looking either triumphant or devastated. When it was finally her turn, Maya walked into Mr. Sterling's office expecting the usual questions about her experience, her strengths, her 5-year plan. Instead, he did something completely unexpected. He asked her about her morning. "Tell me about your day so far, Miss Rodriguez. How did you get here?" Maya was confused but decided to be honest. She told him about helping Eleanor with her groceries, about running to make it on time, about feeling out of place among the other candidates. Mr. Sterling listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied her for a long moment. "Miss Rodriguez, your resume is adequate. Your grades are good, not exceptional. Your experience is limited. On paper, you're probably the least qualified candidate I've seen today." Maya's heart dropped. This was it. Another rejection. "However," Mr. Sterling continued, "something interesting happened this morning. Would you like to know what it was?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice. "I got a phone call from someone who works in this building. Someone who saw a young woman in a business suit helping an elderly lady carry heavy bags, even though she was clearly rushing to get somewhere important. Someone who was impressed by this act of simple human kindness in a world where most people can't be bothered to hold an elevator door." Maya's eyes widened. I don't understand. The person who called me was Mrs. Eleanor Williams. And Miss Rodriguez, Mrs. Eleanor Williams is not just any elderly woman struggling with groceries." Maya felt the room spinning. This couldn't be happening. "Mrs. Williams is the founder of the Williams Foundation, one of our biggest clients. She's worth approximately $50 million. And every few months she does something that might seem a little unconventional. She tests people. She dresses down, goes to different parts of the city, and sees how people treat someone who appears to have nothing to offer them." Maya couldn't speak. She literally couldn't form words. "She called me specifically to tell me about you, Miss Rodriguez, about how you didn't just help her carry groceries. You listened to her story. You cared about her as a human being. You made her feel seen and valued when she was pretending to be invisible." Mr. Sterling stood up and walked around his desk. "Miss Rodriguez, in 20 years of running this company, I've learned that skills can be taught. Experience can be gained. But character? That's something you either have or you don't. And you, young lady, have character in spades." Maya started crying. Right there in the interview, she just broke down. All the stress of the past 8 months, all the rejection, all the fear about her future, it all came pouring out. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I don't usually cry in interviews. I really need this job, Mr. Sterling. And I had no idea about Mrs. Williams. I helped her because it was the right thing to do, not because—" "I know," Mr. Sterling said gently. "That's exactly why you're getting the job. What? You're hired, Miss Rodriguez. Starting salary is $65,000, full benefits, and you'll be working directly with the Williams Foundation account. Mrs. Williams specifically requested you." Maya thought she was dreaming. This couldn't be real. But wait, the story doesn't end there. Because what happened next is even more incredible. 3 months later, Maya had not only exceeded every expectation at Sterling and Associates, but she had also become like a daughter to Eleanor Williams. They met for coffee every Tuesday morning, and Eleanor had become Maya's mentor in both business and life. One Tuesday morning, Eleanor had a surprise. "Maya, dear, I have something to tell you. Something important." They were sitting in their usual cafe, the same place they'd been meeting for weeks. Eleanor looked more serious than Maya had ever seen her. "I've been doing my little tests for over 10 years now. I've met hundreds of people, maybe thousands. Do you want to know how many stopped to help me?" Maya shook her head. 17. In 10 years, only 17 people bothered to help an old woman who looked like she had nothing to offer them. And out of those 17, only 3 actually listened to me like I mattered. Like I was a real person with real feelings and real struggles. Eleanor reached across the table and took Maya's hand. "And out of those 3, you were the only one who made me feel truly seen, truly valued. You didn't help me to feel good about yourself. You helped me because you genuinely cared." Maya squeezed Eleanor's hand. "Mrs. Williams, you changed my life that day." "Oh, my dear." Eleanor smiled. "We changed each other's lives. You see, I've been wealthy for a very long time, but I've been lonely for even longer. My husband passed 15 years ago. My children live across the country and are too busy with their own lives to visit. I have all the money in the world, but I was missing the most important thing of all." "What's that?" "Connection. Real, genuine human connection. You gave that back to me, Maya. You reminded me that there are still good people in this world." Eleanor pulled an envelope out of her purse. "This is for you. Mrs. Williams, I can't accept anything else from you. You've already done so much. Open it." With trembling hands, Maya opened the envelope. Inside was a check. She looked at the amount and gasped. $100,000. "Mrs. Williams, I can't. This is too much. I can't take this. It's not a gift, dear. It's an investment. I want you to use this money to start your own consulting firm. I want to be your first client, and I want to help you build something amazing." Maya started crying again. "But why? Why me?" Eleanor smiled, and for the first time since Maya had known her, she looked truly happy. "Because kindness should be rewarded. Because good people deserve good things. And because I believe that you're going to change the world, one act of kindness at a time." 6 months later, Maya Rodriguez Consulting opened its doors. Eleanor Williams was indeed her first client, but she wasn't her last. Word spread about this young woman who ran her business with integrity, who treated everyone, from janitors to CEOs, with the same respect and kindness. Within 2 years, Maya's firm had grown to 15 employees. Within 5 years, she was featured on the cover of Forbes magazine as one of the 30 under 30 entrepreneurs to watch. The article's headline? "The Woman Who Built an Empire on Kindness." But here's the part that gets me every single time I think about this story. At Maya's wedding 3 years later, she married a wonderful guy she met through one of her business connections. Eleanor was right there in the front row. Not as the wealthy benefactor who had changed Maya's life, but as the grandmother Maya had never had. In her maid of honor speech, Maya said something that I think sums up this entire story perfectly. "They say that success is about who you know and how hard you work. But I've learned that real success, the kind that actually matters, is about who you are when nobody's watching. It's about how you treat people when they can't do anything for you. It's about choosing kindness even when it's inconvenient. She looked directly at Eleanor, who was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. I thought I was just helping an elderly woman carry groceries. But what I was really doing was investing in my future. Not because I knew she was wealthy, but because kindness is always an investment worth making. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds too good to be true, right? Like one of those feel-good stories that people make up to restore faith in humanity. But here's the thing, I actually know Maya personally. She's a friend of my sister's, and I've seen firsthand how this experience shaped not just her career, but her entire approach to life. Her consulting firm? It's real. You can look it up. Rodriguez Consulting specializes in ethical business practices and has worked with some of the biggest companies in the country. And Eleanor Williams? She's still very much a part of Maya's life. They still meet for coffee every Tuesday morning, and Eleanor is now the honorary grandmother to Maya's 2 kids. But the most incredible part of this story isn't the money or the business success. It's how this one moment of kindness created a ripple effect that's still spreading today. Maya's company has a policy that every employee gets 4 hours of paid time off each month specifically to volunteer in their community. They've built schools in Guatemala, funded scholarships for underprivileged kids in Chicago, and started a program that provides free business consulting to small businesses owned by women and minorities. Eleanor, inspired by Maya's example, completely restructured her foundation. Instead of just writing checks to establish charities, she now actively looks for ordinary people doing extraordinary things and finds ways to support them. She's funded everything from a food truck that feeds homeless veterans to a teenage girl who invented a device to help people with disabilities use smartphones more easily. And here's something that'll blow your mind. Remember those other candidates from Maya's interview? The ones who seemed so much more qualified on paper. Brandon, the Harvard MBA guy, got hired by a different company but was fired 6 months later for falsifying expense reports. Jessica, whose father had all those connections, is currently facing fraud charges for embezzling money from her trust fund. David, with his multiple job offers, has been through 4 different companies in 5 years because he can't get along with colleagues or clients. Ashley, the nervous one who seemed nice enough, actually reached out to Maya 2 years later. Turns out, seeing Maya's success and hearing about how she got her start inspired Ashley to completely change her approach to business and life. Ashley now runs a nonprofit that helps job seekers from low-income backgrounds prepare for interviews and find meaningful employment. The story gets even better. Eleanor's tests became legendary in certain circles. Business leaders started hearing whispers about this eccentric millionaire who would disguise herself to test people's character. Some companies actually started training their employees to be nicer to everyone they encountered, just in case they were being tested. Can you imagine? A world where people are kind to strangers because they might be secret millionaires? It's almost funny, except that the end result is the same, people being nicer to each other. But Eleanor saw right through those calculated acts of kindness. She could tell the difference between genuine care and strategic niceness. She continued her tests for 3 more years after meeting Maya, but she never found anyone else quite like her. Maya was special, Eleanor told a reporter once. She didn't help me because she thought I might be someone important. She helped me because she saw another human being who needed help. That's a rare thing in this world. I think about this story a lot, about how we never know who we're going to meet on any given day, about how the person serving our coffee, or cleaning our office, or asking for directions might be the most important encounter of our lives. But more than that, I think about how Maya wasn't trying to change her life that morning. She was just trying to be a good person. She was just choosing kindness over convenience, compassion over self-interest. And that choice, that split-second decision to stop and help someone who couldn't help her back, that choice changed everything. Now, Maya tells this story to anyone who will listen, not to brag about her success, but to remind people that kindness matters, that how we treat others, especially those who seem to have nothing to offer us, says everything about who we are as human beings. She's given talks at business schools, at conferences, at community centers. She always ends with the same message. You never know when you're being tested, not by a secret millionaire but by life itself. Every interaction you have with another person is a chance to choose kindness or indifference, compassion or cruelty, connection or isolation. And those choices, they add up. They define who you are and who you become. The last time I talked to Maya, she told me something that gave me chills. "You know what the craziest part is?" she said. "I almost didn't stop that morning. I was so focused on getting to that interview, so worried about being late, that I almost walked right by Mrs. Williams. I had actually taken about 3 steps past her before something made me turn around. I don't know what it was, my conscience, my mother's voice in my head, just basic human decency. But something made me go back. What do you think would have happened if you hadn't? I probably would have gotten to that interview on time, been rejected like usual, and gone home to eat ramen noodles and stress about rent. Mrs. Williams would have eventually gotten home with her groceries, but she would have felt invisible, forgotten, like she didn't matter. And both of our lives would be completely different right now." She shook her head in amazement. "It's scary to think how close I came to missing the most important moment of my life. All because I was too focused on where I was going to see who was right in front of me. And that, right there, is the real lesson of this story. It's not about secret millionaires or fairy tale endings. It's about being present. It's about paying attention to the people around us. It's about choosing to see others as full human beings worthy of our time and kindness, regardless of what they can do for us. Because here's the truth that Maya learned that day. When you help someone who can't help you back, you're not just changing their life. You're changing your own. You're becoming the kind of person who makes the world a little bit better just by being in it. And in a world that can sometimes feel cold and disconnected, that kind of person is exactly what we need more of. So the next time you see someone struggling, someone who looks like they could use a hand, remember Maya's story. Remember that kindness is never wasted, even when it's inconvenient. Remember that the person in front of you might be a secret millionaire, or they might be someone even more important. They might be your chance to be the person you want to be. Because at the end of the day, we're all just walking each other home. And how we treat each other on that journey, that's what really matters. Maya Rodriguez thought she was just helping an old woman carry groceries. She had no idea she was carrying her future in those bags too. And Eleanor Williams thought she was just testing another stranger's character. She had no idea she was about to meet the daughter she never had. Sometimes the most ordinary moments turn out to be the most extraordinary. Sometimes kindness really is its own reward. And sometimes, just sometimes, good things really do happen to good people. But you have to be good first. You have to choose kindness first. You have to see others as worthy of your time and care first. Everything else? That's just the universe saying thank you. But wait, there's more to this story that will absolutely blow your mind. Because what I just told you, that was only the beginning. What happened 5 years later is so incredible, so perfectly orchestrated by the universe, that it makes the first part look like child's play. 5 years later, picture this. Maya's consulting firm is now a multi-million-dollar operation. She's got offices in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. Forbes has featured her twice, and she's been invited to speak at Harvard Business School. The same Harvard that Guy Brandon was always bragging about. The irony wasn't lost on her. But success hadn't changed Maya. Not one bit. She still met Eleanor for coffee every Tuesday morning. She still remembered every employee's birthday. She still stopped to help strangers on the street. If anything, success had made her more generous, more kind, more aware of her responsibility to lift others up. Eleanor, now in her late 70s, had become like a grandmother to Maya's 2 children, little Sophia, age 4, and baby Marcus, just 18 months old. The kids called her Grandma Ellie, and she spoiled them absolutely rotten. One Tuesday morning in October, Eleanor seemed different. More thoughtful, more reflective than usual. "Maya, dear," she said, stirring her coffee slowly, "I have something important to discuss with you." Maya immediately went into worry mode. Eleanor had been having some health issues lately, nothing serious, just the usual aches and pains that come with age. But still, "Are you feeling okay? Do you need me to drive you to the doctor?" Eleanor smiled. "My health is fine, sweetheart. But I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately. About what we leave behind when we're gone. Don't talk like that, Maya said firmly. You're going to be around for a long time yet. I hope so, Eleanor laughed. But Maya, I'm 78 years old. I've lived a full life, and I've been blessed beyond measure. Especially these past 5 years with you and your beautiful family. She pulled out a thick envelope from her purse. I want to tell you about something I've been working on. Something big. Something that's going to change hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. Maya leaned forward, intrigued. You know how my little character tests led me to you? Well, I've been thinking, what if we could scale that up? What if we could create a system to identify and support good people on a much larger scale? Eleanor opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents. I'm starting a foundation. Not just any foundation, the Eleanor Williams Foundation for Human Kindness. And Maya, I want you to be the CEO. Maya nearly choked on her coffee. Eleanor, I already have a company to run. I can't. Hear me out, Eleanor interrupted gently. This foundation will have an endowment of $50 million. $50 million, Maya. Its sole purpose will be to identify ordinary people doing extraordinary acts of kindness and support them in ways that will amplify their impact. She spread the documents across the table. We'll have teams of people whose job it is to witness and document acts of kindness. When someone helps a stranger, stands up for someone being bullied, goes out of their way to make someone's day better, we'll find them, we'll learn their story, and then we'll change their life. Maya stared at the documents, her mind racing. This was huge. This was revolutionary. But how would it work? How would you even find these people? Eleanor's eyes twinkled with excitement. Remember how that security guard saw you helping me that morning and called Mr. Sterling? Well, what if we had a network of people whose job it was to be on the lookout for kindness? What if we partnered with businesses, schools, community organizations, even social media platforms to identify and nominate people who demonstrate exceptional character? She pulled out her phone and showed Maya a mock-up of an app. The Kindness Network app. Anyone can nominate someone they've witnessed being kind. But here's the catch. The nomination has to be completely anonymous to the person being nominated. They can't know they're being considered for anything. Maya was starting to see the vision, and it was brilliant. So people would just do good things, not knowing they might be rewarded? Exactly. Eleanor exclaimed, just like you did that morning. Pure, genuine kindness with no expectation of reward. Eleanor went on to explain the whole system. Once someone was nominated through the app, a team of investigators would quietly verify the person's character over a period of months. They'd interview family members, friends, co-workers, neighbors. They'd observe how the person treated service workers, how they behaved when they thought no one was watching. Only after extensive vetting would the person be approached with a life-changing opportunity. Maya, this could revolutionize how we think about success and reward systems in our society. Instead of just rewarding people who are already wealthy or well-connected, we could identify and elevate people who have the character to make real positive change in the world. Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. This was Eleanor's legacy, a systematic way to ensure that kindness was recognized and rewarded on a massive scale. But why me as CEO? Maya asked. I'm honored. But surely there are people with more experience running foundations. Eleanor reached across the table and took Maya's hands. Because, my dear girl, you are the foundation. You are living proof that this works. You're successful not despite your kindness, but because of it. Who better to lead this than someone who has walked the path we're trying to create for others? They spent the next 3 hours going over the details. Eleanor had thought of everything. There would be different levels of support depending on the person's needs and circumstances. Someone struggling to pay for college might receive a full scholarship. Someone with a brilliant business idea but no capital might receive funding and mentorship. Someone working 3 jobs to support their family might receive financial assistance to pursue their dreams. But the foundation wouldn't just throw money at people. Each recipient would be paired with mentors, given access to networks and resources, and supported in ways that would help them succeed long-term. It's not about creating dependency, Eleanor explained. It's about removing barriers for people who have already proven they have the character to succeed. Maya was so excited she could barely contain herself. But then reality set in. Eleanor, this is amazing. But running my company and this foundation? I don't know if I can do both justice. Eleanor smiled mysteriously. What if I told you that you wouldn't have to choose? She pulled out another document. I've been in talks with Sterling and Associates. They want to acquire Rodriguez Consulting. They're offering $25 million. Maya's jaw dropped. $25 million? But I never said I wanted to sell. Mr. Sterling called me last month. He's been watching your company's growth, and he wants to bring you and your entire team into Sterling and Associates as a specialized division focused on ethical business practices. You'd maintain complete creative control, but you'd have the resources of a much larger firm behind you. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. Plus, with that kind of financial security, you'd be free to focus most of your energy on the foundation without worrying about your family's future. Maya felt like she was in a dream. This was too much good news at once. Eleanor, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Eleanor laughed. Say yes to changing the world. 6 months later, the Eleanor Williams Foundation for Human Kindness officially launched. The press coverage was insane. CNN, NBC, the New York Times, everyone wanted to know about this revolutionary approach to philanthropy. But the real magic happened when they started identifying recipients. The first person they helped was a janitor named Carlos Martinez who worked at a hospital in Phoenix. Multiple nurses had nominated him through the app, describing how he went above and beyond to comfort patients and their families. During his lunch breaks, Carlos would sit with elderly patients who had no visitors, helping them eat or just listening to their stories. The foundation's investigators discovered that Carlos had been trying to get into nursing school for 5 years, but couldn't afford the tuition while supporting his wife and 3 children. The foundation not only paid for his entire education but also provided financial support for his family while he studied. 2 years later, Nurse Carlos Martinez graduated at the top of his class. Today, he runs his own clinic in an underserved community, providing free healthcare to families who can't afford it elsewhere. Then there was Rebecca Chen, a high school teacher in Detroit who was spending her own money to buy school supplies for her students. She was nominated by a parent who noticed that Rebecca stayed after school every day to tutor struggling students for free, and who had quietly been paying for field trips for kids whose families couldn't afford them. The foundation discovered that Rebecca had been using her entire savings account to support her students, living paycheck to paycheck despite her dedication to education. They provided her with a fund to support her classroom for the next 10 years, plus resources to expand her tutoring program schoolwide. Rebecca's test scores improved so dramatically that the state education department asked her to develop a program that could be implemented in schools across Michigan. She now trains teachers nationwide in her innovative approach to education. But the story that really gets me is about a guy named Tommy Rodriguez. No relation to Maya, despite the same last name. Tommy was a tow truck driver in Atlanta who was nominated by dozens of people through the app. Apparently, Tommy had a habit of helping stranded motorists fix their cars for free instead of just towing them to expensive repair shops. He'd been doing this for years, often using his own money to buy parts for people who couldn't afford them. One woman nominated him after he spent 3 hours in the rain helping her fix a flat tire, then refused to accept any payment. A college student nominated him after he not only fixed her broken-down car, but also gave her gas money to get home. An elderly man nominated him after Tommy drove him to the pharmacy to pick up heart medication when his car broke down. The foundation's investigation revealed that Tommy had been raised by a single mother who struggled to keep their car running. He'd learned to fix cars out of necessity, and he never forgot how scary it was to be stranded on the side of the road with no money and no options. Tommy was barely making ends meet as a tow truck driver, but he kept helping people anyway. The foundation offered to set him up with his own auto repair shop, complete with equipment, training, and business support. Today, Tommy's community auto repair provides affordable car maintenance to low-income families throughout Atlanta. He employs 12 people and has a sliding scale payment system where people can pay what they can afford. He's still the same guy who won't let anyone leave his shop with an unsafe car, regardless of their ability to pay. Within 3 years, the foundation had helped over 200 people across the country. Teachers, nurses, social workers, small business owners, students, retirees, people from all walks of life who had one thing in common. They were good humans who put others before themselves. But the real magic was watching the ripple effects. Carlos, the janitor-turned-nurse, inspired 3 of his former co-workers to go back to school. Rebecca's teaching methods were being used in over 500 schools. Tommy's business model was being replicated in 12 other cities by people who wanted to provide affordable auto care to their communities. Each person the foundation helped went on to help others. It was like watching kindness multiply exponentially. Maya was working 18-hour days, but she'd never been happier. Every morning, she'd wake up to emails from field investigators reporting new acts of kindness they'd witnessed. Every afternoon, she'd review potential recipients with Eleanor and the foundation's board. Every evening, she'd come home with stories that would make her husband cry happy tears. Eleanor, meanwhile, was thriving. She'd found her true calling in life, and at 79 years old, she was more energetic and purposeful than people half her age. "You know what I love most about this?" Eleanor told Maya one Tuesday morning. "We're not just changing individual lives. We're changing the entire conversation about what success looks like." She was right. The foundation's work was getting so much attention that other organizations were starting to copy their model. Universities were creating character-based scholarship programs. Businesses were implementing kindness recognition systems for their employees. Even some governments were exploring how to integrate character assessment into their social programs. "We're proving that good people deserve good things," Maya said, "and that investing in character is the smartest investment you can make." Eleanor nodded. "Remember that morning when you helped me with my groceries? You had no idea you were being tested. No idea that your life was about to change. But your kindness that day has now changed hundreds of other lives too." She paused, looking thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder how different the world would be if everyone knew they were being watched? If everyone assumed that their next act of kindness might be the one that changes everything?" Maya considered this. "Actually, I think the most beautiful part is that people don't know. The recipients of our foundation, they're being kind just because that's who they are, not because they're hoping for a reward." "Exactly," Eleanor exclaimed. "That's what makes it pure. That's what makes it real." Year 4 brought even bigger developments. The Kindness Network app had been downloaded over 10 million times. Major corporations were partnering with the foundation to sponsor recipients. Netflix was producing a documentary about their work. But the most incredible development came from an unexpected source. Brandon. Remember Brandon, the Harvard MBA guy from Maya's original job interview? The one who got fired for falsifying expense reports? He reached out to Maya through LinkedIn with a message that absolutely floored her. "Maya, you probably don't remember me, but we interviewed for the same position at Sterling and Associates 6 years ago. I've been following your career and the foundation's work, and I wanted to reach out to apologize for how I behaved that day. I was arrogant, entitled, and I represented everything that's wrong with corporate culture. Getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to take a hard look at who I had become and who I wanted to be. I've spent the last 5 years working for a nonprofit that provides financial literacy education to low-income communities, and I've learned more about real success from the families I work with than I ever learned in business school. I know this might sound crazy, but would you consider hiring me? I don't care what the position is or what it pays. I just want to be part of something that actually matters." Maya showed the message to Eleanor, who immediately started laughing. "Hire him," Eleanor said without hesitation. "Really? After everything you told me about him?" "Maya, dear, what's the point of believing in redemption if we don't give people a chance to prove they've changed? Besides, who better to help identify authentic kindness than someone who knows what inauthentic ambition looks like?" So Brandon joined the foundation as a field coordinator. His job was to verify the authenticity of kindness nominations, to spot the difference between genuine care and performative charity. He turned out to be brilliant at it. His corporate background gave him insight into how people might try to game the system, but his personal transformation gave him appreciation for real character change. Within a year, Brandon had developed protocols that helped the foundation identify truly deserving candidates with 99% accuracy. He'd also started a support group for other, reformed corporate climbers who wanted to redirect their ambition toward meaningful work. "It's funny," Brandon told Maya during his first annual review. "I spent years trying to impress people who didn't matter, and now I get to celebrate people who actually do." By year 5, the foundation had expanded internationally. They were operating in 12 countries, adapting their model to different cultures and contexts. A teacher in rural Kenya who was building desks by hand for her students. A fisherman in the Philippines who was using his boat to evacuate families during typhoons. A baker in France who was secretly leaving fresh bread on the doorsteps of struggling families. Kindness, it turned out, was a universal language. Eleanor, now 81, decided it was time for another big announcement. "Maya," she said during one of their Tuesday coffee meetings, "I want to tell you about my will." Maya immediately protested. "Eleanor, we've talked about this. I don't want to discuss." "Hush," Eleanor said firmly. "This is important, and I'm not getting any younger." She pulled out a document and placed it on the table. "I'm leaving everything to the foundation. My entire estate, approximately $75 million after taxes. But there's a condition." Maya's heart started racing. "I want you to promise me something. I want you to promise that you'll continue this work for as long as you're able. Not because I'm forcing you to, but because I believe this is your calling." Maya felt tears starting to form. "Eleanor, you know I will. This foundation isn't just my job, it's my purpose." "I know, dear. But there's more." Eleanor smiled mysteriously. "I've been working with lawyers to set up a trust that will ensure the foundation continues operating in perpetuity. But I've also set aside $5 million specifically for you and your family."
Eleanor, no.
"I can't accept." "You can and you will," Eleanor said firmly. "Maya, 6 years ago, you stopped to help a stranger carry groceries. That simple act of kindness has now changed the lives of over 800 people directly, and thousands more indirectly. You've created a movement. You've proven that character matters more than credentials." She reached across the table and squeezed Maya's hand. "This isn't charity, sweetheart. This is justice. Good things should happen to good people. And you, Maya Rodriguez, are one of the best people I've ever known." The announcement of Eleanor's bequest made international news. But what really captured people's attention was what Maya did with her $5 million. Instead of keeping it, Maya announced that she was using the entire amount to create a scholarship fund specifically for young people who had demonstrated exceptional character but lacked the financial means to pursue higher education. "Eleanor taught me that kindness should be rewarded," Maya said at the press conference. "But she also taught me that true reward comes from being able to pay it forward." The Eleanor Rodriguez Scholarship Fund, yes, Eleanor insisted they name it after both of them, would provide full college scholarships to 100 students every year, selected not based on grades or test scores, but on documented acts of kindness and service to others. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl named Jasmine Washington from Detroit. Jasmine had been nominated by her principal after it was discovered that she'd been secretly tutoring younger students for free, organizing coat drives for homeless shelters, and using her part-time job income to buy groceries for elderly neighbors. Jasmine had never expected to go to college, her family couldn't afford it, and while her grades were good, they weren't exceptional. When Maya called to tell her about the scholarship, Jasmine cried so hard she couldn't speak. I help people because it feels right," Jasmine managed to say through her tears. "I never thought anyone was watching." "The best people never do," Maya replied. Today, Jasmine is studying social work at Northwestern University. She calls Maya her fairy godmother and has already started a kindness club on campus that has spread to 15 other colleges. As I'm telling you this story, it's been 7 years since Maya helped Eleanor carry those groceries. The Eleanor Williams Foundation for Human Kindness has directly helped over 2,000 people in 23 countries. Their stories have been featured in documentaries, books, and countless news articles. But the numbers don't tell the full story. What really matters is how this one moment of kindness, Maya stopping to help a stranger, has created a ripple effect that continues to spread around the world. Every person the foundation has helped has gone on to help others. Every act of kindness they've rewarded has inspired more acts of kindness. Maya often speaks at conferences and universities now. She always ends her presentations the same way. 7 years ago, I thought I was just helping an elderly woman carry groceries. I had no idea I was carrying my future. I had no idea that those groceries would feed not just Eleanor's body, but a movement that would nourish thousands of souls. She pauses, looking out at her audience. Every single day, each of you will encounter opportunities to choose kindness over indifference, compassion over convenience. You'll see someone struggling, someone who could use help, someone who just needs to feel seen and valued. When that moment comes, and it will come, remember that you're not just choosing how to treat another person. You're choosing who you want to be. You're choosing what kind of world you want to live in. And you never know. That moment of kindness might just carry your future too. Eleanor is 83 now and still going strong. She still meets Maya for coffee every Tuesday morning. Though now little Sophia, age 9, and Marcus, age 6, often join them. The kids love hearing Eleanor's stories, and Eleanor loves spoiling them with cookies and tales of their mom's adventures. Last week, Sophia asked Eleanor a question that made both women tear up. "Grandma Ellie," Sophia said, "why did you pretend to be poor that day when you met Mommy?" Eleanor thought about this carefully. "Well, sweetheart, sometimes people act differently when they think someone is important or wealthy. I wanted to know what kind of person your mommy really was when she thought I couldn't do anything special for her." Sophia nodded solemnly. "And Mommy was nice to you anyway?" "The nicest," Eleanor confirmed. "That's because Mommy is always nice," Marcus chimed in. "Even to mean people." Maya laughed. "I'm not always nice, buddy." "Yes, you are," Sophia said firmly. "Remember when that man was yelling at the waitress last week? You stood up for her even though he was really scary." Eleanor and Maya exchanged glances. The foundation's next generation was already showing signs of inheriting the kindness gene. "Girls," Eleanor said, using her pet name for both Sophia and Maya, "I have something to tell you." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I've been working on another project. Something I think you'll both be very excited about." Maya groaned playfully. "Eleanor, what are you scheming now?" "Well," Eleanor said with a mischievous smile, "I've been thinking about how to teach kindness to children, how to make sure the next generation understands that character is more important than achievement." She opened the envelope and pulled out colorful illustrations. "I'm writing a children's book series, The Adventures of Kind Kids. Each book will tell the story of a real child who did something kind, and how that kindness made a difference." Sophia and Marcus practically bounced out of their chairs with excitement. "Will you put us in a book, Grandma Ellie?" Sophia asked. "Only if you do something book-worthy," Eleanor winked. "We will," Marcus declared. "We'll be the kindest kids ever. And you know what? They probably will be. Because kindness, like Eleanor discovered all those years ago, is contagious. It spreads from person to person, generation to generation, creating ripples that extend far beyond what any of us can imagine." Maya's story started with groceries and grew into a global movement. Eleanor's loneliness turned into a legacy that will outlive her by decades. Two strangers meeting on a Chicago street corner became a family that has touched thousands of lives. But the most beautiful part of this story isn't the happy ending. It's the reminder that every day, each of us has the power to be someone's Maya. Each of us has the opportunity to see past appearances, to choose compassion over convenience, to treat others with dignity regardless of what they can offer us in return. Because you never know who you're going to meet on any given Tuesday morning. You never know when a simple act of kindness will change not just someone else's life, but your own. And in a world that sometimes feels like it's forgotten how to be kind, that possibility, that hope might be the most important thing of all. What do you think? Have you ever had a moment where a small act of kindness changed everything? Or maybe you've been on the receiving end of unexpected generosity. Share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. And who knows? Your story might be the next one I tell. And hey, if this story moved you, if it reminded you that there are still good people doing good things in this world, do me a favor, share it. Not for me, but for Maya and Eleanor and everyone else who believes that kindness matters. Let's remind the world that being good to each other isn't just nice. It's revolutionary. Thanks for listening, friends. Until next time, keep being kind. You never know who's watching.